The theater lights had barely settled when the crowd noticed something was wrong. A young woman in a shimmering gown leaned forward as if the music itself had suddenly become too heavy to carry. For one brief second, the audience thought it was part of the performance. Then she collapsed into the arms of the man singing beside her. The silence that followed felt colder than the applause that came before it. Years earlier, she had walked through the streets of Philadelphia with the confidence of someone who already believed the world would know her name. She laughed loudly, flirted harmlessly, sang like every note came from somewhere deeper than talent. People remembered her eyes before they remembered her songs. By the late 1960s, Motown had become more than music in America. It was pride. It was movement. It was survival dressed in melody. And in the middle of that golden era stood a young woman whose voice carried softness and pain at the same time. Her chemistry with Marvin Gaye felt almost spiritual. Not manufactured. Not rehearsed. Real. But behind the elegant dresses, television appearances, and timeless records, something darker had already begun growing quietly inside her body. Something nobody could see. And when America finally understood the truth, it was already too late. Before the world knew her as Tammi Terrell, she was just a little girl running through the neighborhoods of Philadelphia with scraped knees, loud laughter, and impossible dreams. Her real name was Thomasina Montgomery, a name that carried history, family pride, and the expectations of two educated black parents who had fought hard to build a better life in America. Her father owned a respected barbershop and moved comfortably through politics and community leadership. Her mother loved poetry, theater, and the stage. In their home, music never felt distant. It lived in the walls, in conversations after dinner, in church on Sundays, and in the quiet moments before bedtime. Even as a child, Tammi moved differently. She could hear a song once and play it back by ear. She danced ballet, practiced piano, sang solos in church with a confidence far beyond her age. People around her believed she was gifted. Tammi herself believed she was destined. But childhood did not stay innocent for long. At 11 years old, she survived a brutal assault while walking home after rehearsal. The attack changed something inside her permanently. Family members later described how the cheerful little girl became quieter, more restless, and emotionally distant. The nightmares came first, then the silence, then the rebellion. By 13, she looked much older than her age. Men noticed her before she fully understood herself. In the neighborhoods of Philadelphia, people began calling her a woman child. She wore confidence like armor, even when pain still followed her home at night. Music became both escape and protection. Tammi entered local talent competitions and quickly developed a reputation for winning nearly every time she stepped on stage. Her voice carried warmth, but there was also ache hidden underneath it. Audiences could feel both at once. Soon producers began paying attention. At just 14 years old, she signed her first recording deal and started working professionally while still attending school. She recorded demos, toured with older performers, and learned how the entertainment industry truly worked long before most teenagers learned how to drive. The industry moved fast around young black female artists during that era. Too fast. One of the biggest turning points came when James Brown noticed her talent. At the time, he was already one of the most powerful figures in soul music. Tammi's mother believed he could elevate her daughter's career to another level, and eventually he signed the young singer to his label. To the outside world, it looked like opportunity. Behind the scenes, it became something much darker. Their relationship turned romantic despite the large age difference, and according to later accounts from people close to Tammi, it also became abusive. Friends and fellow performers claimed they witnessed bruises, fear, and emotional exhaustion hidden beneath the glamour of touring life. Still, Tammi kept moving forward. That became one of the defining patterns of her life. No matter how much pain she carried, she kept smiling for the audience, kept singing through the headaches, kept chasing the version of herself she believed still waited somewhere ahead. And in the distance, Motown was beginning to notice her. When Tammi Terrell arrived at Motown, she did not walk in like a nervous newcomer. She walked in like someone who had already survived enough life to understand exactly who she was. Berry Gordy immediately recognized it. Motown in the 1960s was filled with extraordinary talent. The Supremes were dominating radio. Stevie Wonder was becoming a phenomenon. Smokey Robinson carried elegance in every lyric. Yet even in a building crowded with stars, Tammi Terrell stood out almost instantly. It was not only her beauty, it was the way she controlled a room without trying. People around Motown described her as magnetic. Men admired her. Women copied her hairstyle and fashion. Artists loved being around her because she made every space feel lighter. She laughed often, teased people constantly, flirted naturally. But beneath all that energy was someone still searching for stability. Berry Gordy changed her professional name from Tammy Montgomery to Tammi Terrell, believing the new name sounded unforgettable. He was right. Soon after signing with Motown, Tammi Terrell released solo material and began touring alongside some of the biggest names in soul music. The Motown machine moved fast, and Tammi adapted quickly. Years of performing as a teenager had already sharpened her instincts. She knew how to connect with crowds. She knew how to make people feel seen. But fame also brought chaos into her personal life. During tours with the Temptations, she grew close to David Ruffin. At the time, David Ruffin was already one of the most desired men in black music culture. His voice, style, and swagger made him a star long before social media could amplify celebrity status. Tammi fell deeply in love with him. For a while, their relationship looked glamorous from the outside. There were expensive gifts, public affection, and eventually an engagement ring. But behind closed doors, the relationship became volatile. Stories of jealousy, arguments, and violence slowly surfaced around them. One night, after a brutal confrontation, Tammi reportedly discovered David Ruffin had another family and multiple relationships hidden from her. The heartbreak cut deeply. Friends later said she never fully recovered emotionally from that betrayal. Yet even after all of that pain, destiny was quietly preparing the partnership that would define her legacy forever. Marvin Gaye. When Motown paired Tammi Terrell with Marvin Gaye in 1967, nobody fully understood what they were about to create. The label originally viewed the collaboration as a temporary musical experiment. Instead, it became one of the greatest duos in soul music history. From the first recording sessions, the chemistry felt undeniable. Writers Ashford and Simpson later described the atmosphere as almost spiritual. Tammi and Marvin sang together as if they had known each other for years. Their voices did not compete. They leaned into each other. Softness met longing. Pain met tenderness. Then came Ain't No Mountain High Enough. The song exploded across America and helped define the sound of Motown during its golden era. Suddenly, Marvin and Tammi were everywhere. Radio stations played them constantly. Couples danced to their records in living rooms, clubs, and neighborhood parties across the country. Songs like Your Precious Love and If I Could Build My Whole World Around You turned Tammi Terrell into more than a rising singer. She became part of black music history. But while audiences heard joy inside those records, Tammi herself had already begun suffering quietly. The headaches were becoming impossible to ignore, and the success that looked so beautiful from the outside was beginning to hide something terrifying underneath. At first, the headaches sounded almost ordinary. Long rehearsals, bright stage lights, endless travel, sleepless nights between cities. In the world of Motown, exhaustion was treated like part of the job. Artists were expected to smile through pain, perform through sickness, and never let audiences see weakness. So Tammi Terrell kept going. She carried aspirin in her purse almost everywhere she traveled. Some days she joked about the pain. Other days she quietly disappeared into dressing rooms just to sit in silence for a few minutes before walking back under the lights again. But the pain was growing stronger. Friends noticed moments when she seemed disoriented. Family members later recalled how she complained that it felt like something was pressing deep inside her skull. Still, Tammi refused to slow down. Her career with Marvin Gaye had become one of Motown's biggest successes, and she feared disappointing everyone around her. Then came the night that changed everything. October 14, 1967. The crowd gathered inside a college homecoming concert in Virginia, had no idea they were about to witness one of the most heartbreaking moments in soul music history. Tammi and Marvin were performing Your Precious Love when she suddenly stumbled forward and collapsed directly into Marvin Gaye's arms. For a few seconds, confusion spread through the audience. Then panic followed. Marvin held her tightly as crew members rushed onto the stage. According to people who were there, Tammi appeared unable to move properly after regaining consciousness. Her vision blurred. Parts of her body weakened. But even then, promoters still wanted the show to continue. That moment haunted Marvin Gaye for the rest of his life. Soon afterward, doctors finally discovered the truth. Tammi Terrell had a brain tumor. The diagnosis shattered everyone around her. Suddenly, the glamorous young Motown star became a patient moving between hospitals, surgeries, medications, and painful recovery periods. The woman whose voice once filled theaters now spent much of her time in hospital rooms under fluorescent lights. Still, she fought. That became the tragedy and the beauty of Tammi Terrell at the same time. She refused to surrender quietly. Even after surgeries, she returned to recording sessions whenever her strength allowed it. Motown released more music from Marvin and Tammi, including You're All I Need to Get By and Ain't Nothing Like the Real Thing. To listeners across America, the records still sounded warm and alive. Most fans never realized how sick she truly was. Behind the scenes, her condition continued worsening. The tumor kept returning. More surgeries followed. Her weight dropped dangerously low. She began losing her eyesight. Eventually, walking became difficult. The once vibrant young woman who lit up every room now relied on wheelchairs and constant medical care. By the end, even speaking became exhausting. People close to her later said the pain became unbearable during her final months. Yet Tammi rarely complained openly. She seemed more worried about how her illness affected others than herself. In March 1970, after undergoing another brain operation, Tammi Terrell slipped into a coma. She never woke up. She was only 24 years old. The news devastated the music world. Motown lost one of its brightest spirits. Fans across America mourned not only the death of a singer, but the loss of a future that felt limitless. But no one seemed more destroyed than Marvin Gaye. Friends described him as emotionally shattered after her death. He cried openly at the funeral. For a long time afterward, he struggled with depression, addiction, and guilt. Many people close to him believed a part of Marvin never fully recovered after losing Tammi. Because for all the success, fame, and timeless records they created together, their story had never truly been about celebrity. It was about two wounded artists who somehow found peace in each other's voices, and then watched that peace disappear far too soon. In America, Tammi Terrell's death felt larger than entertainment news. For many black families during the late 1960s, Motown represented something deeply personal. It was more than records spinning on the radio. Motown was dignity during a difficult era in American history. It was elegance, ambition, and visibility for black artists who carried enormous pressure every time they stepped onto a national stage. And Tammi Terrell embodied all of it. She represented beauty without arrogance, strength without bitterness, vulnerability without weakness. Older audiences especially connected with her because she felt real in a way many celebrities no longer do. Her smile never looked manufactured. Her pain never looked theatrical. That was why her death hit so hard. Across black communities in America, conversations began quietly shifting toward the darker realities of the music industry. People started questioning how much pressure young artists were expected to endure. Long tours, constant performances, emotional exhaustion, physical collapse hidden behind makeup and applause. Some critics openly questioned whether Motown should have slowed her schedule earlier after her health problems became obvious. Others defended the label, pointing out that Berry Gordy covered enormous medical expenses and tried to support her treatment financially. But even decades later, debate still follows the story of Tammi Terrell and Motown. Because underneath the glamour of soul music lived an uncomfortable truth. Many young black performers carried the weight of an entire culture on their shoulders while still fighting private battles nobody could see. Internationally, Tammi Terrell became remembered as one half of one of the greatest duet partnerships in music history. In Europe especially, Marvin and Tammi records continued influencing generations of soul singers long after her death. Their music crossed racial and national boundaries because the emotions inside those songs felt universal. Love, longing, hope, fragility. Even now, younger audiences discovering Motown for the first time often stop when they hear Tammi Terrell's voice. There is something timeless about it, something warm but aching at the same time. And perhaps that is why her story continues surviving decade after decade. Not because it ended tragically, but because people recognized themselves inside it. The exhaustion behind the smile, the strength hidden inside fear, the desperate attempt to keep shining while quietly breaking apart. Thousands of miles away from Philadelphia, generations removed from the Motown era. And still, people listen. Some voices disappear when the person is gone. Tammi Terrell's never did. More than 50 years after her death, her music still moves through America like an old memory drifting out of another room. Plays at weddings, late-night radio stations, vinyl collections resting beside photographs that have slowly faded with time. Younger listeners discover her through Marvin Gaye. Older listeners remember exactly where they were the first time they heard her sing. That kind of legacy cannot be manufactured. Tammi Terrell never lived long enough to fully see the impact she would leave behind. She never watched future generations study Motown as cultural history. She never saw how deeply Ain't No Mountain High Enough would become woven into American life itself. But maybe part of her already knew, because even during the hardest moments of her illness, people close to her described someone still trying to laugh, still trying to comfort others, still trying to hold on to life with everything she had left. That mattered. In a world obsessed with fame, Tammi Terrell left behind something far more difficult to achieve. She left emotional truth inside music. Her songs did not sound perfect because they were technically flawless. They sounded unforgettable because listeners believed every word she sang. That is rare. Her story also became part of a larger conversation about Black women in entertainment. About how talent can be celebrated while suffering remains hidden. About how young artists are often expected to survive impossible emotional pressure simply because audiences need them to keep smiling. And yet, despite all the heartbreak surrounding her story, people do not remember Tammi Terrell only for tragedy. They remember the warmth in her voice, the elegance, the humor, the chemistry she created with Marvin Gaye that still feels unmatched decades later. Even Marvin himself seemed permanently changed after losing her. Many fans believe the emotional depth heard later in albums like What's Going On carried pieces of grief he never fully escaped. Maybe that is the strange power of loss. Sometimes the people who leave early continue shaping the world long after they are gone. Today, Tammi Terrell remains one of the most beloved figures in Black music history. Not because her life was easy, not because her story ended happily, but because her humanity survived inside every recording she left behind. And somewhere between the melodies, the silence, and the pain, her spirit still feels present. If this story brought back memories of Motown, soul music, or someone you once loved, share your thoughts below. And if voices like Tammi Terrell still deserve to be